Welcome back to part 7 of our live training session here with our K24 swapped Honda Civic Si. This training module, we're going to look at the cold start and warm-up enrichment process, making sure that we have proper fueling and our idle control has been sorted out. We're also going to be taking a look at things within our lambda control feedback and doing a pull on the dynos so we can make sure that we have our lambda control not over adjusting or under adjusting our fueling mixture. We'll explain what that means as we go through the tutorial. We're also going to be taking a look at setting up and working with our transient fueling or the acceleration enrichment when we have a throttle event, a big large throttle change or a throttle movement. It's going to be applying the appropriate amount of fuel to the engine. We're not going to over or under fuel the engine. We have a lot of things to talk about here and go through. Let's jump in so we can check this out. Welcome back to our live training session here with our K24 swapped Civic Si. This training module, we're going to jump into a bunch of different topics to wrap up the calibration process here on our K-Series engine using the Emtron system. We're going to focus on cold start, so this is going to be looking at cranking fuel, going to be looking at our warm-up and post-start fueling, also our idle control coming up into normal operating temperature. We're all going to be taking a look at our transient fueling. We want to go and take a look at a few things within our lambda feedback control that I want to point out. I want to go in and look at things within our decel, fuel cut, or overrun fuel cut control where we shut off the injector in lift throttle conditions. And then finally, we'll be looking at doing a flex fuel based tune. Now we have the ethanol sensor enabled here, and we have some of that flex fuel based logic already programmed when we set up our base map. We're going to go through what all that means here in this tutorial and then demonstrate doing a pull or two after we've drained the petrol fuel out of the fuel system and put in ethanol, and then look at the process, and it's relatively straightforward, and see how it's going to go, see how much more power we can make out of our engine here safely. Now let's jump in and talk about where we're at right now in terms of our cold start situation, and then we'll talk about the tables we need to focus on, and we'll go and then actually cold start the engine, see how everything goes, and then we'll move into reviewing the logged data and then make changes as we need. And then we'll move into looking at some things warmed up state, transient fueling and lambda control, a couple additional things that we really need to focus on when the engine's warm, not when the engine's cold like this. So let's jump in here and take a look. So first things first, what we need to focus on is cranking fuel. Now, if I go here to escape and I jump down here under starting, we have two different tables that are responsible for cranking fuel. We have our pre-injection comp table. The pre-injection comp table here is going to be a big burst or shot of fuel for the first cranking revolution of the engine. Now we can configure this in a couple different ways, but that's the way I have it configured here under our starting setup. If we review this real quick, we have our pre-crank injection enable first crank index signal. So only just one event. We can see that we do have another option here for first crank index signal multiple events. That is another option that we can use. In this case, I'm just doing my option here, number 2. There is a start position and a key on position. Now, I don't like to use these simply because I prefer to wait until the engine's actually cranking for it to apply that pre-crank fuel, because if I just key on the engine and I key off and I key on again, let's say a couple different times, I could actually have a whole bunch of fuel built up into the cylinder that can create some problems. That would be what would happen if you use the key on option. Start position can also be the same kind of thing if you cycle your ignition key and you have a start position switch configured for your Emtron. Every time you're keying on and off, it can start to add that additional big shot of fuel in anticipation you're going to fire off the engine, but if you don't, it'll build up and that can create problems. So what I'm going to do is use my first crank index signal times 1 event. And we can see here the multi-pulse count, that's not going to apply for this, but in this case we'll have just at 1 pulse. So we're just doing a big shot of fuel, and that's going to help get the combustion lit off when we just hit the key to start cranking. Now, once it exits the pre-injection comp table here, it's going to go into our crank comp table. And the crank comp table, this is going to be a multiplier against our calculated injector pulse width coming from our airflow model, and this is going to be essentially giving us the long-term cranking pulse width. Now what we find is this is a multiplier, and if we look here in the values of the table, we have it at 150. 150 is going to be multiplying whatever the normally calculated pulse width is and multiplying by 150%. This should be enough to light off the engine. Now I know on warm engine state, so let's say 60 to 80, even 90 here, the values that we have, 80, 60, 40, 20, they get the engine to fire off just fine here with the Emtron. Now the other way this table is configured, it's based on coolant temp, it's also based on firing event counter. So as we start to crank over the engine and it cranks over more and more, it'll dissipate that cranking fuel away so that it's not going to potentially flood out the engine. It'll act kind of as an anti-flood effect.
we should be able to fire off the engine with these values. These are about usually what I run for most just piston engines on pump gas. Now, we also have our post-start comp table. The post-start comp table is going to be looking at firing event counter as well, and it's going to be looking at engine temperature. Now in this configuration, this is a percentage of multiplier.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.